Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 21, Section 3. So it's about women's rights and rights of minorities. So raise your hand if you're a girl and you want to go to college. Okay, Salah, please put your hand down. Okay, all of you put your hand down. Bree, Gabby, and Janella, raise your hands. Okay, that's how many women would go to college by the late 1800s. And now keep your hands raised, and Christina, Nicole, Ayla, and Elena, raise your hands. And that's how many women would go to college by the 1900s. Thank you. Okay. Even though most of them went to college now, they ended up being teachers or social workers because being a doctor or a lawyer was hard to get into because that was mostly dominated by men. Since a lot of women couldn't go into being doctors or lawyers, many of them became active in reform. They campaigned for causes like the banning of alcohol consumption, the right to vote, child welfare, and political reform. Many reformers said that alcohol was bad because the husbands would go to a saloon or to a bar or something and drink and get drunk, and when they would get home, they would beat on their wives. So the women figured out that it's not really good to drink. So after many years of protesting and temperance, in 1919 the 18th Amendment was passed, banning the sale, transportation, and production of alcohol. Since African Americans could now vote, women thought it was unfair how they could vote, but women still couldn't vote. And many political leaders opposed. They thought that women voting was a bad idea. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony founded the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or the NAWSA, to promote women's suffrage. That same year, women in Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah could vote. Some people, like Alice Paul, didn't think that the NAWSA was helping, so Alice Paul founded the National Women's Party, the NWP, and they took like a more intense approach by protesting, going on parades, demolition strikes, just to draw attention to the cause for women to vote. And one time they picketed the White House, they took the fences down and they hung up signs that supported their cause. And because of that act, Alice and other NWP leaders got arrested. Finally, in 1919, the 19th Amendment was passed, granting the women the right to vote, and a year after it was made into a law.
Booker T. Washington was an African American who wanted to teach African Americans that education was the way to go, and that he thought that if they were educated, it would eventually lead to the end of discrimination. Ida B. Wells, she wrote in a newspaper about lynching and how African Americans were discriminated. And from 1885 to 1915, over 3,000 African Americans were lynched, which was being killed by mobs. And other people such as W.E.B. Du Bois took injustice of fighting to racial injustice. And while he was at college, he did research about this, and he founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which won Gwynn versus the United States, which it banned the grandfather clause, which meant that if the African Americans' grandfather couldn't vote, they couldn't vote either, which was unfair because they were slaves. And for white Americans, they were always free and they could vote as much as always. And the National Urban League also helped African Americans by allowing them to move into northern cities and face less discrimination and help out with their jobs.
Failures of reform. After all of this had happened, they had formed reforms for the African Americans and women. There were other groups that also weren't allowed to vote and didn't have the same rights as the white people. The groups were the Native Americans, the Chinese, and the Mexican. So they started to fight and form little groups and stuff to go against. They formed groups like for example, Chinese immigrants organized neighborhood associations, cultural groups, and churches that people would gather there and talk about and go against and try to get equal rights for them.
Thank you.